Hi all, I'm Trisha Peach, host of the Peach Buzz, and I'm so glad you've come to join us again this week. I'm sorry it's been a couple weeks off. I had a terrible cold and I had almost no voice. So I'm glad to be back, and it was just a cold. I'm good. But I hope you got to join us at the recent deep dive conference. That was really fun. Thank you, Anne Marie. I loved getting to help speak there. You still hear a little bit of it there. But today we've got a topic that just kind of blew up my blog when this was posted. What's wrong with our family services? What is wrong with our family services? I know some people go, well, you don't believe in family ministry. I do. But we have a big problem with a lot of the family services that we do. There needs to be some changes. So what are some of the problems in our family ministry services? As you know, with the explosion of Orange, and we talk about how children's ministry is the job of the parent, which is true. But I would also advocate that children's ministry is the job of the church. So what I'm saying is, if the parent drops the ball, that doesn't mean we get to wash our hands and say, well, the parent screwed up, we're off the hook. No, the church still needs to reach out. Everybody who knows me knows my heart is for those kids who don't know Jesus yet, whose parents are not saved. I know that the ones that are raised in the church have much better odds of holding on to their faith, but that's not even guaranteed. So if the church drops the ball and doesn't reach its kids, that doesn't mean the parent just gets to give up. No, it's supposed to be a partnership of parents and the church in reaching this next generation. It is the most important topic. You can tell I'm a little biased, because if we do not reach the next generation for Christ, you might as well just close the doors and wait for your church to die. The church is supposed to be, a healthy church is 25% or more under the age of 12, and many churches do not have that. And I think it's an easy excuse to shrug our shoulders and say, well, the parents screwed up. Parents didn't raise their children right. We tried to partner with the parents. They wouldn't do it. So I guess, what can we do? If you didn't know, there is a massive, massive crisis, a shortage of children's ministry professionals, children's ministry volunteers. You already knew you don't have enough volunteers. But across the country and across the world, there are not enough people in children's ministry. And you say, well, that's because our church is too small to hire someone. The medium-sized churches are having a horrible time. The largest mega churches are having a horrible time. They wait years. So sometimes it's easier to say, well, the parents are supposed to do this. Oh, well, we don't have to pay a salary. We don't have to worry about it. We'll just have family church. And I'm all for family church services. I grew up in a smaller church, and growing up, I was eating raisins while sitting, listening to my dad preach, and, coloring or doing something quietly. So I grew up that way, and I'm all for it. What I'm saying is, we do not have the right definition for family service. So I'm going to get into that. So a lot of churches are saying we're going to have a family service. We're going to have a family service. The number one problem I see here is the definition. If your definition of family service is, we're not going to offer children's ministry, we're going to have a service for adults, and we're going to tolerate them bringing their children as long as they keep them unnaturally quiet. Give them crackers and cookies and color and keep them on a screen the entire time and call it a family service. That's not a family service. That's an adult service. That's a service geared toward adults, done by adults, for adults. And you tolerate children coming in there as long as they act like adults, as long as they don't act like children. Of course that's not going to work. Of course that's not going to work, especially if in the past you've had quality children's ministry. The kids are going to know the difference. They know when there's nothing for them there. I have heard the worst excuses from parents. A lot of parents don't like family services because that's what comes to mind. And some actual quotes I've heard are the following: "Nobody told me there wasn't going to be childcare. I would have stayed home if I'd known there wasn't going to be childcare." Now, of course, I don't like that because I don't think of children's ministry as childcare. I hope you don't. We're there to minister. We minister to these kids. We love these kids. We don't do childcare, but some parents still think of it that way. And they'll say, if I'd known you weren't going to have childcare, I wouldn't have come. They'll say, I can't worship with distraction. I can't worship with the distraction of my children here. And the church would say, you need to model worship to your children, which I agree. I agree with that. I'm with my kids all week. I absolutely must have a break. I need a break. I need a break. I need a break. You hear that from parents a lot. The problem there again is they're still thinking of kids ministry as childcare, not as quality ministry. They were trained to think this way in the past. They can be trained to think another way about children's ministries. I've heard, I do not believe it would work for me to have my special needs child in the main service. They would be too disruptive. I have heard this as well. And if your definition of family service is that all the children are going to stay unnaturally quiet and act just like adults, you are going to leave a lot of families with children that have special needs out. You've just kind of drawn a line in the sand that they can't come. So we're going to need to expand our definition of family service. So I need you to have open mind for me here. So most of our problems with having a family service would be resolved if we know what a family service is not. So number one, a family service is not a service just like every other, with no difference in lineup, themes, or preparation. It is not a service geared just for adults, decorated for adults, songs for adults, sermons and illustrations aimed at adults. A service that allows children in the sanctuary is light years away from a service that welcomes children and wants them to be there. Children are not engaged in that kind of a family service. They're not engaged at all. They're trying to be placated. They are told to sit silently, color on the back of the bulletin. No one is really concerned whether children take anything away from the service at all. The only goal is for the adults to like the sermon, for the adults to get something out of it. The only goal for the children by default is silence and not to distract the important adults who are being ministered to. A service that this kind of a family service is almost like a punishment for children. I've heard of churches having a family service because no one will volunteer for children's ministry. So they'll say, you know what, because we don't have enough volunteers, we're going to have family service. I hope you're all happy, and may God have mercy on your souls. So it's like a punishment. We have to have service together as families because you bad people won't volunteer. And of course, that's not going to get you more volunteers. They're going to think, oh, wow, nobody else wants to do this. Why does nobody want to do this? Oh, dear, it's a punishment. And then we're setting the expectation that our family services are punishment when people refuse to volunteer. No one wants to volunteer. I don't like that whole line of thinking. Serving in kids ministry is one of the greatest things that can ever happen. I love serving in kids ministry, and it should be a privilege, and not everybody can or should serve in children's ministry. Family ministry services should never be used as a punishment. I cringe when children's ministry leaders threaten a child with, if you don't stop acting up, I will send you to big church. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll tell the senior pastor, making the senior pastor the bad guy. And I will cast you out to the main service where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. No. And then we wonder why they turn 12 and never want to come back to church again. We made it a punishment, and that should never happen. Sitting in the main sanctuary with their parents, then we just made this picture that that's the worst punishment we can offer. That really has to stop. So how can we completely revision our idea of a family service? What would it look like? What could it look like? Come on, children's ministry people are some of the most imaginative people I know of, some of the most creative people I know. We can do a lot better than a service for adults that we tolerate kids at, sort of. We can do a lot better than that. How do we intentionally craft a service with a dynamic worship experience that crosses denominations, that crosses generational barriers, not just one age group? Because when I say adults, I'm also, usually it's targeting the 40 and 50 somethings, sometimes the 60 and 70 somethings, and all the other adults are left out too. How do we become a family of families, as my favorite professor would say, Dr. Keysbo? How do we become a family of families? I would like to explore this real quick. So we've said the problem. Now let's look at some of the ways we can change family ministry in our churches and make it work. Number one, we got to set the right expectations. When you say you're going to have a family service, this should be intentional. This should not be a punishment just because people aren't volunteering enough. This is a reward. This is a fantastic experience that we want to make. But I would set that expectation right up front. This is not going to be a quiet service. This is not going to be quiet. And the adults are going to have to grow up and deal with it. You know, the adults they actually can handle it. They can handle it. They can handle cool set pieces being up there. They can handle children's ministry worship songs. They can handle having skits and drama and even a puppet. In fact, they may find they like it. I've heard adults say, oh, well, we're going to have all of that. And I'm like, yeah, and you can handle it because this is a family service. We're going to have elements for every age group, not just you. And it teaches us all that we have to work together as one church, and we're going to minister across generations. We need to expect some noise, expect some crackers in the carpet, expect movement, not sitting still, expect God to show up in a powerful way. Don't expect the sanctuary to always be totally neat. Oh my gosh, I would so much rather clean up crackers that were ground into the carpet on Monday, which I've had to do many different times, than have a church that's dying and dead and no kids. Who cares if I have to get some raisins off of the pew? I've had to do that too. We had kids show up, thank God. It's going to be messy and it's going to get loud, but they're here, and that's what matters. So we set that expectation, then we intentionally design the programming to reach across generations. A family service is not going to fly if you aim just at those 40-somethings in your music, your methods, or your message. And I don't mean just talking to the kids for 5 minutes in the middle. I mean intentionally crafting a whole service with elements that reach different age groups. Representation matters where that's concerned. So you're going to want to have adults, older people, single people, and children involved. You can use them as ushers, worship leaders, announcement givers. Pre-record some announcements that the kids give. Have some of the oldest people come up and give testimonies. Have some of your oldest people help with ushering. Everyone should be a part. And that means you need to look at that representation, because if the only people on your stage are your normal worship team and your pastor, you're broadcasting this is a service for this age group of adults only. Everybody else better be quiet and not get anything out of it. So up that representation there. We have done this many times, and I've heard, oh, it was going to be a disaster. We packed out. It was phenomenal. We ended up doing them more and more and more because we packed out. And I'm going to tell you why here in a minute. When you design these services, you should get input from various perspectives. If you have people in your church that are single, people that are blended families, very young people, you need different perspectives on how to reach them for Christ. And I've told the kids this too. We've done very old-fashioned hymns that our old people love, and our kids didn't die. In fact, some of the kids were like, wow, that's a really neat new song. it's like Mansion Over the Hilltop or In the Garden. They've never heard it before, and they liked it. So a hymn isn't going to kill a kid, and a kid's action songs are not going to kill the adults. We can learn to worship God together. We better learn, because that's what we're going to be doing in heaven. So enlist ministry representatives from many different age groups to do the ministry on the stage. A family service has so much impact. If you include students, retirees, kids, 30-somethings, your dramas, readings, videos, testimonials should be sure to include people with special needs. Include singles, blended families. Include, if you have in your church, different races, backgrounds, colors, languages. Make it a beautiful service with a lot of illustrative elements. Add things. You say, well, our church doesn't usually have video clips. We don't have a puppet number. We don't have a skit. Well, this is the perfect time to debut it. You want to try to appeal to all 5 senses. This helps appeal to different learners. For our church, it became the favorite service. It became the one that everybody just was like, wow, this is so cool. Traditional church services usually have a talking head. I talk, you listen, which has proven to be the most ineffective way to teach, most ineffective way to reach people. I'm not against preaching. I love getting up and preaching. I do Sunday morning service sometimes. But, Paul said, I'm all things to all men. By any means, I might save some. And if that means handing out goldfish crackers, then that's what I'm going to do. Communicate a vision of your church as a family of families, that no one is left out. I know that sometimes when we say family service, single people, elderly people feel like, oh, so I can't come, because they're thinking of younger families with a whole bunch of kids. And it needs to be a family of families where nobody's left out, that we are a family together. And I think you will find that everybody loves those illustrative methods. We bust in some of our parishioners from the nursing home, and they said their favorite part was the puppets. They're like, when are you going to have the puppets back? Those are hilarious. We like the puppets. And then, of course, we had a couple of kids doing skits and solos. Oh my goodness, they all brought every one of their grandma's, aunts, cousins, roommates, janitor, twice removed, and they're all there, packed out, because so-and-so was singing a solo on one of the worship songs and they wanted to see it. If you engage those kids, you're going to engage those parents and the grandparents. I encourage you to use the kids in the ministry, not just receivers. One of the most beautiful moments I remember from one of our family services, we said, anyone who would like prayer, raise your hand. And there was an older gentleman who was going in for a surgery that he was very nervous about. And these children came flying off the stage, surrounded this older man, and just began to pray. And I mean, tears are running down his face. Tears are running down my face. The rest of the congregation was very moved, and they were challenged, saying, we need to get more involved. Look at the faith of these children. And isn't that what it's all about? That we encourage each other, and these kids learn from watching adults worship. So am I against family services? Absolutely not. They are phenomenal. They have such impact, but we need to be more intentional about it. How about you? What have you seen go wrong in the family services you've seen and that you've tried? What have you seen go phenomenally well at your church? Please comment down below. I read all of the comments. Thank you for what you do for Jesus and his kids. Let's craft amazing family worship experiences that will impact and go the distance. And I will see you next week on the Peach Buzz. Bye-bye.